The November wind cut through the streets of Brooklyn like a blade, carrying with it the smell of rain-soaked asphalt and the distant promise of an early winter. Olivia Harper pressed her hand against her lower back as she pushed through the glass door of Tony's diner, the familiar ache radiating through her spine like a constant companion during these final weeks of pregnancy. Nearly 8 months. She was nearly 8 months pregnant, and every step felt like carrying the weight of the world, though she had carried heavier things before, bruises that took weeks to fade, a baby she lost at 5 months because of a man's fists, and secrets that could get her killed if the wrong person found her. Olivia, table 7 needs refills, and the couple at the counter wants their check. Tony called from behind the register, his gruff voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversations that filled the diner. "On it," Olivia replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes as she grabbed the coffee pot with one hand while steadying herself against the counter with the other. Her feet throbbed in the worn sneakers that had seen better days, much like everything else in her life lately. And beneath her long sleeves, the faded bruises on her wrists still ached when she moved too fast, ghosts of hands that had gripped too tight. The fluorescent lights of Tony's diner hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of artificial warmth that made the place feel stuck in time. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked and patched with duct tape, and the black and white checkered floor had lost its shine years ago, dulled by countless footsteps and half-hearted mopping. But it was work. It was income. It was survival. And most importantly, it was a place where no one asked questions, where a woman with fear in her eyes and a growing belly could disappear into the rhythm of coffee refills and dirty dishes. Olivia made her rounds, refilling coffee cups and delivering checks with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to conserve every ounce of energy, her eyes darting to the door every time it opened because 3 years of living with a monster had taught her that danger could walk in wearing a familiar face, until the baby kicked, a strong, insistent movement against her ribs that made her pause mid-step. "You okay, hun?" Mrs. Patterson, a regular who came in every Thursday night, looked up from her soup with concern etched across her weathered face. "Fine, just active, baby," Olivia said, managing a more genuine smile this time because Mrs. Patterson reminded her of her mother back when she still had a mother, back when she still had someone who would hold her when she cried, instead of being the reason for her tears. "You should be home resting, not on your feet like this, Mrs. Patterson chided gently the way only someone who had raised children of her own could. Olivia wanted to say that home was a relative term, that home for the past 4 weeks had been a cardboard barrier and a thin blanket behind the dumpsters of this very diner, that the apartment she once shared with Ryan was a place of nightmares, not shelter, that the women's shelters were too dangerous because he had found her at the last one and nearly killed her, that she had nowhere and no one left in this world because he had made sure of that, isolating her from friends, from family, from anyone who might have helped her escape sooner. Instead, she just nodded. "Soon, I will rest soon." The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than the truth. Easier than explaining that rest was a luxury for women who were not running for their lives, for women who did not flinch at shadows, for women whose bodies were not maps of violence that told stories they could never speak aloud. What Olivia did not know, what she could not possibly have known as she returned to her work with aching feet and a heart full of fear, was that in just a few hours a black SUV would pull into the alley behind this diner, and the man who stepped out of it would change everything, for better or for worse, in ways she could never have imagined. Under the tired lights of Tony's diner, amid the clatter of spoons and forks against worn dishes and the familiar scent of burnt coffee, if this is the first time you are hearing Olivia's story, or if you have followed it from the very first moments and felt every trembling beat inside this young woman, then please take a small moment for us. If the story touches you, if it brushes against some corner of memory, or makes you think of the people around you, we ask that you subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video so we can continue bringing more everyday stories that carry weight and emotion into each passing day. And if you are watching from Brooklyn, from Melbourne, or from any other city, leave a comment below to let us know where you are listening from, so we can see how Olivia's journey, though steeped in shadows, can still find the hearts of strangers who know how to understand. Tell us how you feel, because every comment is a small light kindled along this long road. Olivia's life had not always been swallowed by darkness like this. There was a time when she believed in love, believed in the future, believed that this world still had room for the small dreams of a 22-year-old girl who had just graduated from nursing school. She remembered vividly the first day she stepped into Mount Sinai Hospital with her brand new degree, and a heart overflowing with hope. Remembered the pride of slipping into the crisp white uniform, remembered the long, exhausting night shifts, during which she still found herself smiling because she knew she was doing something meaningful. Then Ryan appeared. He had been a patient in the emergency department after a minor car accident, only a few scrapes, and a charming smile that made Olivia blush before she could stop herself. He asked for her phone number, called her every day, sent flowers to the hospital, whispered sweet words no one had ever said to her before. Ryan Mitchell, 30 years old, worked in real estate, handsome, successful, and seemingly so perfect that Olivia often wondered why someone like him would choose an ordinary nurse like her. The first 6 months were paradise. He took her to elegant restaurants, bought her expensive gifts, told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. After 8 months of dating, Olivia moved in with Ryan, believing it was the first step toward the happy life she had always dreamed of. But paradise carried cracks she did not see or did not want to see. The first time Ryan became angry, he only smashed a glass. The second time, he punched a hole in the wall. The third time, the first slap struck her cheek, and Ryan cried, apologized, said he loved her too much and lost control and swore it would never happen again. Olivia believed him. She believed him the 4th time, the 5th time, the 10th time, until every apology became part of a violent cycle she no longer knew how to escape. Ryan began to control every part of her life. He disliked her speaking to male co-workers, disliked her going out with friends, disliked her calling her mother too often. One by one, Olivia's relationships were severed. Friends stopped reaching out because she declined every invitation. Her mother died of cancer when Olivia was 26, and Ryan did not allow her to attend the funeral, saying her mother had hated him and she must choose between the living and the dead. Her father had left when she was a child, without a word, without a single return. Olivia became completely alone, and that loneliness made her cling even more tightly to Ryan, the only person left beside her even though he was the one destroying her day by day. Then she learned she was pregnant for the first time. Olivia remembered the trembling inside her chest as she stared at the 2 red lines on the test, remembered the brief shimmer of hope that perhaps a baby would change everything, that perhaps Ryan would become a better man. But when she told him, Ryan's eyes darkened. He did not want a child, did not want responsibility, did not want to share Olivia's attention with anyone else. The beating that night was the most brutal she had ever endured. Ryan kicked her in the stomach once, twice, 3 times, until she curled on the floor in a pool of her own blood. She lost the baby at 5 months, a little boy she never had the chance to name. The doctors asked what had happened, and Olivia lied, said she had fallen down the stairs, said it with the empty eyes of a woman who had lost everything. Ryan stood beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, playing the grieving husband before everyone, and no one questioned him. No one ever questioned him. After the miscarriage, Olivia knew she had to run, but fear had burrowed deep into her bones. It took her another year to gather enough courage, and when she finally left with a small bag and a few $100s, Ryan found her at the first shelter after only 2 weeks. He dragged her out in the middle of the night, beat her right on the street, said that if she tried to run again the next time would be the last time she ever breathed. Olivia knew he was not joking. The chime of the wall clock striking 11 pulled her out of the suffocating memories. She blinked and realized she was standing in the middle of the diner with a pot of cold coffee in her hand, and Mrs. Patterson had left at some point. The diner was nearly empty, only a drunk man slumped over a corner table and a young couple packing up their textbooks to go home. Olivia shook her head to chase away the fragments of the past, reminding herself that Ryan was not here, that she had been gone for 4 weeks, that this time she had been more careful, leaving no trace, contacting no one from her old life. She set the coffee pot on the counter and began clearing the empty tables, wiping them mechanically while her mind drifted back to the ache of the child she had lost. The baby in her belly nudged lightly, as if sensing her sadness, and Olivia placed a hand over her stomach, whispering an apology that never reached her lips. This little girl was the only reason she was still alive, the reason she endured freezing nights beside dumpsters, the reason she swallowed her tears and worked 12-hour shifts with swollen feet and a back that felt split in 2. "Olivia, you can go now," Tony said as he appeared beside her, his worried expression poorly concealed beneath his usual gruff tone. He was a 60-year-old man with calloused hands and a heart far softer than his rough exterior, and Olivia knew he had seen more than she wanted him to. "Thank you, Mr. Tony," she replied, trying to smile as if everything were normal. The diner owner studied her for a long moment, his gaze lingering on the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched whenever the door opened, the thin jacket she had worn over and over for the past 4 weeks. "Do you have a stable place to stay?" he asked, his voice gentler than usual. Olivia nodded quickly, far too quickly to be convincing. "Yes, I am fine. I have a place." The lie slipped out as easily as always, and Tony did not press further even though his eyes said he did not believe her. He handed her $72 in tips, more than usual because he had secretly added $20 from his own pocket, and Olivia pretended not to notice. She thanked him again and hurried into the staff room, stuffing the money into her worn backpack that held all she had left in the world: a change of clothes, a bottle of prenatal vitamins from a free clinic, a water bottle, and a tiny blue stuffed elephant she had bought at a thrift store for $2. She stared at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger with a gaunt face and eyes full of constant fear, 27 years old yet looking like 40. She thought bitterly, then turned off the light and slipped out the back door. The alley behind Tony's diner was pitch black, only a faint street lamp glow filtering between the buildings. Olivia moved through the darkness with the ease of someone who knew every corner, every trash bin, every puddle on the ground. Her sleeping spot was tucked behind the largest dumpster, where the brick wall formed a nook shielded from most of the wind. She had arranged layers of cardboard for insulation, topped with a thin blanket she had found at a laundromat, creating a makeshift nest for the two of them. Olivia sat down, leaned her back against the brick that still held a trace of the day's warmth, wrapped the blanket around herself, and cradled her pregnant belly. The November wind sliced through the alley like a blade, and she shivered despite curling into the smallest shape she could. "I am sorry, sweet girl," she whispered to the baby, her voice breaking inside the night. "I am sorry I cannot give you a home yet. Sorry you have to shiver in the cold with me. Sorry that I am such a terrible mother." The baby kicked again as if answering, and Olivia smiled through her tears. "But I promise you," she continued, her voice steadier, "I will protect you no matter what. I will not let anyone hurt you, will not let anyone lay a hand on you. I have lost you once already, and I will never let that happen again. You are all I have, the only reason I wake up every morning. I love you." Olivia closed her eyes, trying to sleep as the cold seeped through every layer she had. She did not know that in only a few minutes her life would veer in a completely different direction, that someone was coming, someone who would see her in this darkness and simply not be able to walk away. At 11:23 at night, a sleek black SUV turned into the alley behind Tony's diner, with the smoothness of a prowling predator returning to familiar territory. The vehicle stopped about 10 meters from the large dumpster. The engine went silent, but the headlights stayed on, casting a pale gold beam across the moss-streaked brick wall. The back door opened and a man stepped out, his tall frame cutting a dark silhouette against the glow like a statue carved from shadow. Dominic Callahan, 36 years old, the crime boss who controlled most of Brooklyn and part of Manhattan, the man whose name alone could make even the stubborn ones bow, stood still for a moment, drawing a deep breath of the cold night air as if trying to push away the dull, throbbing headache left behind by a 4-hour meeting with the other bosses. Viktor Petrov, that name still left a bitter taste in Dominic's mouth. The Russian mafia leader who ruled Brighton Beach had been encroaching more boldly than ever, challenging Dominic's power through covert deals and threats disguised behind a courteous, artificial smile. Tonight's meeting should have resolved something, yet it only convinced Dominic that a territorial war could erupt at any moment. He loosened his tie, unbuttoned the top of his expensive white shirt now creased after a long day, and leaned back against the car. Luca Moretti, his right hand, remained in the vehicle. Knowing the boss needed a minute of silence no one was allowed to disturb, Dominic closed his eyes, letting the November wind skim across his face like a form of self-punishment. He hated nights like this, nights when memories of Grace returned with such clarity that he could almost smell the jasmine perfume his sister used to wear. 8 years had passed since the police in Chicago called to tell him they had found the frozen body of a young woman in an alley behind an abandoned restaurant. Grace Callahan, 23 years old, 7 months pregnant, homeless, alone, cold, and frightened in the last hours of her life. Dominic had not known what she had been suffering, had not known how brutally her boyfriend had beaten her, had not known she had run away and lived on the streets for 3 months because she had been too ashamed to call her brother for help. He was the most powerful mafia boss in Brooklyn, capable of making anyone kneel with a single nod, yet he had failed to protect his own sister. That failure haunted him every night, turning into an endless nightmare, turning into the quiet ache he hid beneath a facade of ice. After Grace died, Dominic had found the boyfriend and done things he never regretted, things the police would never find evidence of. But revenge had not brought Grace back, had not erased the image of her curled on a morgue table with pale skin and lips gone blue. Dominic opened his eyes and looked up at the starless night sky above the city, wondering why he had come to this alley tonight. Tony's diner was a place he sometimes went to when he needed distance from meetings and enemies, when he needed to remember he had once been a 10-year-old boy following his father into this diner for apple pie. Tony knew who he was, knew the Callahan family, but the old man never asked questions, and Dominic respected that. He had planned to slip inside for a cup of coffee and leave, but something made him stop. A sound, so faint it was nearly swallowed by the wind and the distant traffic. A whisper, a woman's whisper, drifting from somewhere in the darkness behind the dumpster. Dominic tilted his head, certain he had not imagined it. The whisper trembled with the weight of someone trying hard not to cry. Instinct, the kind honed from 20 years in the underworld, made him gesture for Luca to stay put as he moved slowly toward the dumpster at the end of the alley. His expensive leather shoes made no sound on the damp ground, and he moved through the dark with the mastery of a wolf approaching its prey. But what he saw when he rounded the dumpster was not a threat and not an enemy. It was a woman. She lay curled on layers of flattened cardboard, wrapped in a thin blanket far too fragile to shield her from the cold that had her shaking uncontrollably. Her pale, tangled blonde hair covered part of her face, yet Dominic could still see the bluish tint of her lips and the frightening pallor of her skin, and her stomach, the rounded, tense belly of a woman deep into pregnancy, pushing against the thin fabric of her coat like a silent accusation against the cruelty of the world. Dominic's heart clenched as if someone had reached inside and crushed it. The sight before him slipped over the memory like two images merging. This woman over Grace, this alley over that alley in Chicago, and for a moment he could not breathe. The woman's eyes opened abruptly, perhaps sensing another presence, and her reaction struck Dominic harder than anything he had ever witnessed. She screamed, a strangled, terror-ridden sound, then tried to scramble backward even though her spine was already pressed against the brick wall. Her green eyes widened in the darkness, filled with the pure fear of a cornered creature. "Please don't," she begged, her voice hoarse and trembling, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly as if she could shield her unborn child with her own fragile body. "Please don't hurt me. I won't say anything to anyone, I swear I won't say anything. Tell Ryan I am dead. Tell him he will never find me again." Dominic did not move, afraid any shift might terrify her further. He had seen fear countless times in the eyes of enemies realizing their fate, in the eyes of traitors when they were caught, but the fear in this woman's eyes was different. This was the fear of someone who had been hurt too many times, fear etched into bone and turned into instinct. "I don't know any Ryan," Dominic said, his voice low and as gentle as he could make it, as if speaking to a wounded sparrow. "No one sent me. I just happened to walk by and heard you." Olivia did not believe him, of course she didn't. 3 years with Ryan had taught her that no one in this world could be trusted, that sweet words were only the prelude to pain. She pressed herself harder against the wall, and when her sleeve slid up as she shifted, Dominic saw the bruises, not one or two, but a map of violence carved across her pale skin. Old bruises yellowing beneath newer ones in deep purples, the marks of fingers that had squeezed too hard, faint scars from earlier wounds. Dominic felt fury flare inside his chest like a sudden blaze, but he forced it down, knowing any display of aggression would only frighten her more. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice still calm but edged with steel, the kind anyone who knew him would recognize instantly. Olivia did not answer, only shook her head, trembling. She was so cold, Dominic saw it now, so cold her lips had turned blue and her body shook without pause. She was pregnant and freezing to death right in front of him, just like Grace 8 years ago, and Dominic knew he could not let it happen again. He shrugged off his expensive cashmere coat, a coat worth an entire month's wages for most people, and lowered it to the ground, gently sliding it toward her. "You are cold," he said. "Use this for now. I will not come any closer, I promise." Olivia stared at the coat as if it were a trap, then looked up at the man in front of her. In the faint glow of the headlights, she saw a chiseled face with storm-gray eyes, cold but not cruel, hardened, yet carrying something like buried sorrow in the fine lines around them. She did not know who this man was, did not know he was the most powerful mafia boss in this part of the city, only that he was looking at her not with hunger or disdain, but with the eyes of someone seeing the ghost of someone he had once loved. Olivia reached out with trembling hands to pull the coat toward herself, not because she trusted the stranger before her, but because the cold had settled deep into her bones, and she no longer had the strength to refuse anything that might offer even a hint of warmth. The coat was heavier and softer than anything she had ever touched, carrying the faint scent of expensive cologne and sandalwood, and she wrapped it around her body like a blanket, while never taking her eyes off the man standing a few steps away. "You cannot stay here," Dominic said, his voice still holding that strangely gentle tone for someone who looked as intimidating as he did. "You are pregnant, and in cold like this you will not survive the night on the street. Let me take you somewhere safe, at least for tonight." Olivia shook her head, her instinct to protect herself stronger than reason. "I do not need help from anyone," she said, though she knew full well how absurd those words sounded when she lay behind a dumpster 8 months pregnant and covered in bruises. "I do not know who you are. I do not know what you want. No one gives anything for free in this world." Dominic sighed, remembering Grace, remembering his sister's stubborn refusal to accept help because she had been too ashamed and too frightened. If someone had found Grace in that alley in Chicago and not walked away, perhaps she would still be alive. "I do not want anything from you," he said, with a sincerity that surprised even him. "I just cannot walk away knowing a pregnant woman is freezing to death on the street. I lost someone important for the same reason, and I do not want it to happen again. You may hate me, you may not trust me, but please let me help you, at least tonight." Olivia wanted to refuse, wanted to scream that she did not need anyone, that she could take care of herself, but her body disagreed with her will. Her head began to spin, spots of light danced before her eyes, and she realized she had not eaten anything all day except the dry piece of bread Tony had slipped her that morning. The anemia she had ignored for weeks suddenly revealed its full force, and she felt as though someone were draining the last remnants of strength from her body. The baby inside her kicked weakly, as if exhausted too, and Olivia placed a hand on her belly, trying to focus on the faint movement of her child. "Sweet girl," she whispered, her voice fading. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Dominic noticed something was terribly wrong when her body began to sway, when her green eyes lost focus, and her skin turned a frightening shade of white. He stepped forward just as she collapsed, catching her before her head could strike the cold ground. Her body was far too light in his arms, impossibly light for someone 8 months pregnant, and fury flared inside him once more at the thought of what kind of man had treated her so brutally. "Luca," he called sharply, his voice returning to the cold authority of a crime boss. "Open the door, now." Luca Moretti sprang from the driver's seat, his eyes widening at the sight of his boss carrying an unconscious pregnant woman. He did not question, did not hesitate, simply opened the back door and helped Dominic lay her inside. Dominic climbed in beside her, lifting her head onto his shoulder and pulling the warm coat tighter around her trembling body. He could feel the weight of her stomach against his arm. "To Dr. Chen's clinic," he ordered, leaving no room for delay. "Call ahead and tell her a pregnant woman needs immediate care." Luca nodded and drove out of the alley with as much speed as possible without jostling the patient. Inside the car, under the interior lights, Dominic saw her face clearly for the first time. She was young, perhaps 26 or 27, her delicate features blurred by exhaustion and the faint bruises along her cheekbones. She was beautiful, he realized, beautiful in the way crushed flowers are when they still try to turn toward the sun. He did not know who she was, did not know her story, did not know what a man named Ryan had done to her, but he knew one thing with complete certainty. He was not going to let her die. Not tonight, not in his hands, not when he had the power to change her fate. Grace had died because no one had been there to save her, but he was here now, and he would not make the same mistake twice. "Doctor?" Sarah Chen's clinic sat on the 20th floor of a high-end Manhattan tower, a place ordinary patients could never reach without a special recommendation. She was the best obstetrician in the city, trained at Harvard and later in Switzerland. But more importantly to Dominic, she had cared for his mother in her final years, and was one of the very few people he trusted completely. When Luca stopped the car in front of the building, Dr. Chen was already waiting in the lobby with her nurses, her expression serious, and she asked no questions when she saw Dominic carrying an unconscious pregnant woman inside. They placed Olivia on a stretcher and rushed her into the clinic while Dominic waited outside, his fists clenched as anxiety gnawed at every nerve in his body. 30 minutes passed like 30 hours as he paced the hallway, ignoring Luca's suggestion to sit, unable to shake the image of the woman limp in his arms, cold as ice, covered in bruises. At last, the clinic door opened and Dr. Chen stepped out, removing her gloves with an expression he knew too well, not good news. "How is she?" he asked at once, his voice tighter than he wished. Dr. Chen studied him for a long moment before answering, anger simmering behind her calm professionalism. "She is severely anemic," she said, her tone steady but edged with outrage. "Her hemoglobin is dangerously low, only 7 grams per deciliter when normal for pregnancy should be 11 to 12. She is severely malnourished, far below the expected weight for a 7-month pregnancy." Her body is trying to nourish the baby while she herself has nothing left. Dominic listened, his jaw clenched to the point of pain. "What else?" he asked, sensing she was withholding something. Dr. Chen sighed, placing a hand on his arm as if preparing him. "There are signs of abuse," she said softly. "Not just the bruises you saw. She has an old rib fracture that healed improperly, scars on her back and abdomen from past injuries, evidence of abdominal trauma months ago. And Dominic," she paused, her eyes heavy with pity. "She has been pregnant before and lost the baby. Based on the scarring and her condition, I estimate about 1 to 1.5 years ago, and the cause was almost certainly external trauma, not natural loss." Dominic felt as though someone had punched through his chest. Rage roared through him like an inferno, burning away every shred of restraint. He wanted to break something, wanted to find this Ryan and tear him apart, wanted to do what he had once done to the man who destroyed Grace, but he forced himself still, because the woman inside did not need more violence, she needed protection. "And the baby?" he asked, his voice rough. "The baby is healthy, doctor," Chen answered, "and that is the only good news. The heartbeat is strong, the development on track. She has protected the child at all costs, sacrificing her own health to ensure the baby's safety, and that is why she is in such critical condition." Dominic nodded, swallowing the heaviness in his throat. "Will she recover? If she receives proper care, nutrition, and rest?" "Yes. I have given her fluids and iron supplements. She must stay at least 1 night for monitoring, and after that she needs a safe place until she gives birth." "Doctor," Chen looked straight into Dominic's eyes. "More importantly, she must stay far from the man who did this to her. If he finds her now, I do not believe she or the baby would survive." "I understand," Dominic said, his voice like ice but carrying a silent vow. "He will not come near her. May I see her?" Dr. Chen hesitated, then nodded. "She may wake at any moment. Be gentle. She will be terrified to wake in a strange place." Dominic stepped into the room, his heart beating harder than usual as he saw Olivia lying on the bed with an IV in her arm, looking small and fragile against the crisp white sheets, her pale blonde hair spread over the pillow, her face finally showing a hint of color. He sat in the chair beside the bed, keeping his distance so he would not frighten her, and waited. 10 minutes later, Olivia's green eyes fluttered open. She blinked several times, scanning the unfamiliar room in confusion before her gaze landed on Dominic, and terror immediately flooded her eyes. She struggled to sit up, to pull out the IV line, her body shaking with panic. "Where am I?" she cried, her voice breaking. "Who are you? What did you do to me? Where is my baby? Is my baby all right?" Dominic raised both hands in a gesture of surrender, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible despite his imposing height making such a thing nearly impossible. And he spoke gently, slowly, as if addressing a wounded wild creature. "Calm down," he said. "You are in Dr. Chen's clinic. She is an obstetrician. You fainted in the alley and I brought you here. Your baby is completely safe. She has already checked. The heartbeat is strong and the little one is developing normally." Olivia froze, her hands still fumbling with the IV line, but the news about her baby halted every movement. She looked down at her belly, placed a trembling hand over it as if to confirm, and when the baby gave a soft kick in response to her touch, relief flooded her so completely that tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am Dominic Callahan," he continued, deciding to reveal at least his name. "I found you behind the dumpster at Tony's diner tonight. You were freezing and barely breathing. I could not leave you there." Olivia searched his face for deceit, for danger, for a hidden agenda, but all she saw was a man with storm-gray eyes weighted by fatigue and something that resembled buried sorrow beneath his ice-cold exterior. "Why?" she asked, her voice still trembling. "Why would you help me? You do not even know who I am." "Because I could not help," Dominic answered, and the honesty in his voice startled her. "The doctor said you are severely anemic and malnourished. You need rest and proper care until you give birth. I have a large penthouse with plenty of empty rooms. You can stay there as long as you need. There will be someone to care for you, to ensure you have proper nutrition and safety." Olivia shook her head instantly, her self-defensive reflex stronger than her reason. "No," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I do not need charity. I do not need anyone's pity. I can take care of myself and my baby." She tried to sit up as if to prove her point, but her body betrayed her and the dizziness forced her back down. He noticed that weakness, and Olivia hated herself for not being stronger. "That is not charity," Dominic said, pulling the chair a little closer but still keeping a respectful distance. And it is not pity. He hesitated, as though wrestling with something inside himself, then met her eyes with a grief so raw she felt her breath stall. I once had a sister, he said softly. Her name was Grace. She was 5 years younger than me, always smiling, always believing the best of people. Then she met a man who beat her, but she hid it from me, from everyone, because she was ashamed, because she was afraid, because of reasons only those who have survived abuse truly understand. Olivia felt a sharp, aching sting in her chest, because she understood all too well. She became pregnant, Dominic continued, his gaze drifting as though he were watching the past replay in front of him. She ran from that man but did not call me because she thought I would be angry. I thought I would blame her. She lived on the streets for 3 months, alone, cold, and scared. He paused, his jaw tightening as if he were fighting back a tide of pain. They found her in an alley in Chicago, frozen to death, 7 months pregnant. He looked at Olivia, his gray eyes now glistening. If someone had found Grace before that night and not walked away, she might still be alive. The child I never met might still be alive. I have carried that regret for 8 years, asking myself every day whether things would have been different if only I had looked sooner, searched harder, paid more attention. Silence settled over the room. Olivia no longer saw a dangerous stranger. She saw an older brother who had carried grief like a stone in his chest for nearly a decade. A man looking at her and seeing the ghost of the sister he never saved. I am not asking you to trust me, Dominic said. I am not asking you to be grateful. I am only asking you to let me do for you what I could not do for Grace. Let me help you, at least until you give birth safely. And after that, if you want to leave, I will not stop you. Olivia remained silent for a long while, staring at her swollen belly, thinking of the freezing nights behind the dumpster, thinking of the child who needed her strong, thinking of the promise she had whispered that she would protect her baby at any cost. She had no other choice, and she knew it. If she returned to that alley, she could die, and her child with her. All right, she whispered, exhausted, just temporarily, until I give birth. After that, I can take care of myself. Dominic nodded, asking for nothing more. He knew that for someone who had lost everything, agreeing to accept help was already monumental, and he would demand nothing further, not now. The next morning, when Dr. Chen confirmed that Olivia was stable enough to move, Dominic brought her to his penthouse in the black SUV with Luca driving. Olivia sat in the back seat, silently watching the city pass by outside the window, struggling to process the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Only the night before she had been curled behind a dumpster, and now she sat in a vehicle worth more than any apartment she had ever lived in, heading toward the home of a man she knew nothing about except his name and the story of the sister he lost. The car pulled up to a towering glass and steel skyscraper in the Upper East Side, where a single month's rent was likely equal to an entire year of Olivia's nurse salary. Dominic helped her out carefully, avoiding unnecessary contact because he knew she was still frightened, and guided her through the marble lobby, where the security guards bowed to him with reverence edged with fear. The private elevator carried them to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Olivia felt as though she had stepped into another world entirely. Dominic's penthouse was vast, with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Manhattan. Morning light spilled across glossy oak floors and modern furnishings that each looked as though they could cost a small fortune. A black grand piano sat in the corner beside a marble fireplace, where a quiet fire crackled, and abstract paintings, surely originals, hung on the walls above a cream leather sofa large enough for 10 people. Olivia froze in the doorway, afraid to step further, terrified that her worn shoes would somehow stain the perfection around her. She had never set foot anywhere like this, never imagined people lived in such comfort while she fought every day just to survive. A middle-aged woman appeared from the kitchen, her kind face softening into a warm smile. She looked around 50, her brown and silver hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and her gentle eyes regarded Olivia with welcome rather than curiosity or judgment. "This is Elena," Dominic introduced. "She is the housekeeper and has been with my family since I was a boy. If you need anything, tell her." Elena stepped closer and took Olivia's hand with the tenderness of someone greeting a long-lost family member. "Welcome, dear," she said warmly. "I have prepared your room, and breakfast will be ready in 15 minutes. You must rest after the trip." Olivia did not know how to respond to such kindness. It had been so long since anyone treated her like a human being rather than a punching bag. She only nodded, her throat too tight for words. Elena guided her to the guest bedroom, and once again Olivia had to suppress a gasp. The room was nearly the size of her old apartment, with a king-size bed draped in crisp white linens, a walnut wardrobe, a vanity with a large mirror, and a window overlooking Central Park. The private bathroom gleamed with white marble, a tub large enough for her to soak comfortably even at 8 months pregnant, and shelves lined with expensive shampoos and soaps. Elena left her after showing her how everything worked, telling her to make herself at home. When the door closed, Olivia stood alone in that luxurious space and felt something inside her break free. She stepped into the bathroom, shut the door, and sank onto the cold marble floor, sobbing harder than she had in years. She cried for the freezing nights behind the dumpster, for Ryan's beatings, for the baby she lost, for 3 years of living in hell, for the unexpected kindness of a stranger, and the gentle welcome of the housekeeper. She cried because she could not believe anyone would help her without asking for anything in return, because she could not believe she deserved anything good after everything that had happened. The baby kicked firmly as if comforting her, and Olivia wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering through tears that everything would be all right, though she did not know whether she was speaking to her child or trying to convince herself. The first week passed like a dream. Olivia feared she might wake from it any moment, and each morning when she opened her eyes on the soft bed with its crisp white sheets, she needed a few seconds to remember where she was and why she was no longer lying on cold cardboard under an open sky. Elena woke her with generous breakfasts of sunny-side-up eggs, buttered toast, fresh fruit, and warm milk, all arranged beautifully on a wooden tray the housekeeper brought directly to her room because Dr. Chen had insisted she rest as much as possible. In the beginning, Olivia could barely finish even half the food, her stomach accustomed to emptiness, but Elena encouraged her patiently, never forcing, never judging, only offering the gentle care of a mother Olivia had lost long ago. Her skin slowly regained color, the dark circles beneath her eyes faded, and for the first time in many months she no longer felt dizzy when standing. Dr. Chen visited the penthouse twice that week, checking her vitals and the baby's growth, pleased to see Olivia's hemoglobin rising from 7 to 9 grams per deciliter, and the baby growing stronger, kicking more firmly, as if sensing that its mother finally had the nourishment she needed. Dominic was rarely home during the day. Olivia knew he was busy, but never asked with what. But each evening he returned, and they ate dinner together at the long dining table while Elena served meals prepared with meticulous care. The first dinners were quiet, awkward even. Olivia unsure what to say to such a powerful man, and Dominic seemingly not the type to make small talk. They sat across from each other, the clink of cutlery filling the silence, until he asked her about her life before all this, about her dreams, and everything began to shift. She told him how she had wanted to be a nurse since childhood, how she had spent hours in hospital waiting rooms when her mother underwent cancer treatment, admiring the nurses in their white uniforms caring for strangers with calm and kindness, how she had worked her way through school without help from anyone, how proud she had been on her first day at Mount Sinai, wearing her scrubs and ID badge, how meaningful those long, exhausting shifts were. Dominic listened, not the shallow, distracted listening Ryan once imitated, but truly listened, asking thoughtful questions, remembering the small details she shared, and bringing them up again in later dinners, never interrupting, never steering the conversation back to himself, never showing boredom or impatience, only watching her with those steady gray eyes that made her feel, for the first time in a very long while, that someone genuinely wanted to hear her speak. She did not ask about his work, and he did not offer it, as though they shared an unspoken agreement that some truths were better left untouched. Yet she noticed the changes around the penthouse. Men in black suits posted in the lobby when she glanced out the window, new security cameras installed in every hallway, and Luca always close to Dominic like a loyal shadow. Olivia understood these precautions were connected to her, that Dominic was protecting her from someone or something, and she did not know whether to feel grateful or afraid, perhaps both. But when evening came and she sat across from Dominic sharing stories of past night shifts and the patients who had taught her life lessons, she felt something she had forgotten existed. She felt heard, she felt respected, and though she knew this comfort might be temporary, though she knew she should not become accustomed to it, she could not stop herself from hoping that maybe, just maybe, life was offering her a second chance. The second week began with an afternoon she would never forget, for as she walked from the bedroom toward the kitchen to fetch a glass of water, she heard voices coming from Dominic's office through the door left slightly ajar, words she had never wanted to hear drifting into the hallway. Territory. Shipments. Our men. And then the word that froze her blood, mafia, spoken in the cold tone of a man she did not recognize, followed by a mocking question about how Callahan planned to handle Viktor Petrov. Olivia stepped back, heart hammering violently. She had suspected. Of course she had suspected the penthouse, the black-suited guards, the fearful respect people showed Dominic. None of it fit an ordinary businessman. But hearing the word itself made everything real, terrifying. And she retreated to her room, sitting on the bed with shaking hands over her belly, trying to make sense of the impossible truth. She had escaped one monster only to find herself living under the roof of another, one of the kind she had only seen in movies, the kind who killed without blinking and buried bodies where no one would find them. But then she remembered the look in Dominic's eyes when he spoke of Grace, remembered how he had placed his coat beside her in the freezing alley without stepping closer, remembered his patience and respect through both weeks. The man she knew did not match the violent image of the mafia she had imagined. What that meant, she could not yet say. That evening, when Dominic returned and they sat down for dinner, Olivia could not pretend everything was the same. She watched him, her green eyes filled with questions she was afraid to ask, and Dominic noticed instantly. "You know, don't you?" He said, not a question but a quiet statement, his voice calm yet edged with tension. Olivia nodded. Dominic set down his knife and fork, exhaling as she saw genuine exhaustion for the first time on his face. "What did you hear?" he asked. "Enough to know you are not a normal businessman," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "Enough to know you are dangerous." He remained silent for a moment, weighing his words, then met her gaze without flinching. "I control most of Brooklyn," he said evenly. "My family has done this for 3 generations. My father passed it to me, and I have run it for 15 years. I am not a good man by society's definition. Olivia, I have done things you would not want to know, but I have never lied to you, and I will not start now." Her throat tightened painfully. She wanted to stand and run as far from him as possible, but where would she go? Back to the alley behind the dumpster? Back to a life she and her daughter would not survive through winter. She had no other choice, and they both knew it. "I am afraid," she whispered, honest to the point of breaking. "I do not know who you are. I do not know what you have done, and I am carrying my child under your roof." Dominic rose, walked around the table, and knelt beside her, not touching her, simply looking at her with the most sincere expression she had ever seen. "I understand your fear," he said softly, "and you have every right to it, but I promise you on my life that I will never harm you or your child. My world is dangerous, but you will be shielded from it. No one touches you while you are here, no one on this earth, not even that man named Ryan. You are safe with me, Olivia. I know you have no reason to believe me yet, but give me the chance to prove it." Olivia looked into those gray eyes and saw something she did not expect. Honesty, protection, and perhaps something deeper she dared not name. She nodded, not because she fully trusted him, but because she no longer had the strength to run, and because some quiet part of her wanted to believe that not all dangerous men were monsters. The 3rd week brought changes Olivia never expected. Small and delicate shifts, like the way morning sunlight slipped through the curtains and slowly brightened a room she no longer recognized as a place she feared. And after the night Dominic confessed the truth about himself, something between them shifted. The invisible wall she had built began to crack, and she no longer tried to seal the fissures. One evening, as she sat on the sofa reading a book on newborn care that Elena had bought for her, Dominic walked into the living room after a long day. He did not retreat to his private room to change as he usually did, but sat beside her, his gray eyes drifting from the book in her hands to the rounded swell of her belly. "Does the baby kick a lot?" he asked, and Olivia was surprised because it was the first time he addressed the baby so directly. "A lot, especially at night," she replied, placing a hand on her stomach. "This little girl never wants to sleep." Something softened in Dominic's gaze at the gesture. "May I?" he asked hesitantly. "May I read to her? I have heard babies can hear voices from outside the womb." Olivia froze, startled that this powerful and frightening man could make such a tender request. She nodded, unable to speak as her throat tightened. Dominic took the book from her, opened to a random page, and began reading in his deep, warm voice. It happened to be a chapter about how to bathe a newborn, not exactly riveting material, but the seriousness with which he read it, as though it were the most important contract of his life, made Olivia bite her lip to keep from laughing. The baby kicked hard when she heard his voice, as if responding, and they both felt it. "She likes your voice," Olivia said, the first genuine smile in months appearing on her lips before she realized it. Dominic looked at that smile, and something in his eyes made heat rise in her cheeks. The next morning when Olivia awoke, she found a new white oak cradle placed in a corner of her room, with delicate carvings along the edges, and beside it a small dresser filled with tiny colorful baby clothes, soft blankets, and all the toys a child might need in her first year. Elena explained that Dominic had called late the previous night and ordered everything to be delivered before Olivia woke. She stood among the gifts, touching a tiny pale pink onesie, and tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness, but because she could not remember the last time someone had done something purely good for her, with no expectation of anything in return. That night, after dinner, Olivia finally told Dominic everything about Ryan, how they met, the illusion of happiness, the first slap, the 3 years of hell, the first baby she lost to the violence of his kicks, the time she tried to escape and was dragged back, the scars she carried and the stories behind each one. She told all of it, leaving nothing out, and when she finished, she realized she was crying while Dominic gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His face was a mask of control, but his eyes burned with a fury Olivia had never seen in anyone. "I can find him within 24 hours, Dominic said, his voice like ice. "I can make him vanish from this earth and no one will ever find him. Say the word, Olivia, and I will do it." She knew he was not bluffing, knew he had the power and the will to carry out that promise. Part of her, the part beaten and terrorized for 3 years, wanted to say yes, wanted Ryan to suffer what he had inflicted on her. But the other part, the part still clinging to the person she once was, shook her head. "Do not," she whispered. "Do not make yourself into what he is because of me." Dominic looked at her for a long moment, then nodded, and she knew he would honor her choice even if he hated it. He extended his hand, not to hold hers, but simply offering it, palm upward, a wordless invitation she could refuse. Olivia looked at that hand, the hand of a dangerous man, a man who had done things she did not want to know, but also the hand that had placed his coat over her in the freezing alley, had bought the cradle for her child, had read to the baby with quiet care. She laid her hand in his, and when their fingers intertwined, she felt something inside her begin to mend. The fragile peace Olivia had begun to feel shattered on a late afternoon at the end of the 3rd week, when she was alone in the penthouse, Dominic out handling business, Elena out buying groceries, and her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The moment she opened it, the blood in her veins turned to ice. It was a photograph of her standing by the penthouse window, her pale blonde hair caught by the afternoon sun, her rounded belly visible through the glass. The photo had been taken from a building across the street with a telephoto lens, every detail disturbingly sharp. Below it was a message she did not need to read twice to know who had sent it. "Think you can hide from me, you whore. I know where you are. I know who you are living with. He cannot save you. No one can. Wait for me." Olivia dropped the phone, her hands shaking so violently she could not pick it up again. She backed away until she hit the wall and slid down to the floor, curling around her belly as her body trembled uncontrollably. Ryan had found her. After 4 weeks of feeling safe, after daring to hope, he had found her. She did not know how. Perhaps someone from her old life had seen her in Brooklyn, perhaps through connections he still had from his real estate days, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that he knew where she was, knew who she was with, and he was watching her. The phone buzzed again, and Olivia flinched as if struck. She did not want to look, but her hand reached for the phone under the weight of terror. The second photo showed her and Dominic entering the building the day before, when he had taken her to her checkup with Dr. Chen. Dominic's hand rested lightly on her back in a protective gesture, and they were looking at each other in a way any stranger could read clearly. "Your new boyfriend looks rich," the message said, "but he does not know what a filthy whore you really are. I will show him. I will show the whole world. Then I will come take back what is mine. That baby in your belly is mine. Do not forget it." Olivia gagged and stumbled into the bathroom, vomiting until her stomach was empty, cold sweat and tears streaming down her face. The baby kicked wildly as though sensing her terror, and she held her belly, whispering shaky reassurances she did not believe herself. When the trembling eased, she sat against the bathroom wall, her mind racing chaotically through what she should do. Her first instinct was to call Dominic, to tell him everything, but then she stopped. If she told him, what would he do? He had said he could make Ryan disappear, and now that she understood the truth of who Dominic was, she no longer doubted it. But if he did that, he could be caught, could lose everything because of her. She could not let that happen. She had already brought too much trouble into his life, had taken his home, his food, his protection, his time, and she could not let him pay an even greater price for her. Olivia deleted the messages, deleted the entire conversation thread, as if doing so might erase the threat, though she knew it was foolish. "Maybe he is only trying to scare me," she whispered to herself. Maybe he will not really do anything. But deep inside she knew it was a lie, because Ryan never threatened without acting, and this time would be no different. Olivia tried to hide her fear during the next 2 days, tried to act normal around Dominic and Elena, tried to smile and carry conversations as if nothing had happened, but she did not know that the change in her was far more visible than she realized. The way she flinched whenever her phone buzzed, the way she avoided standing near the windows, the way her eyes constantly scanned the room as though searching for an invisible threat, and she certainly did not know that Dominic was not the only one watching her. On the second evening, Luca entered Dominic's office with the tense expression he wore only when bringing bad news. "Someone is watching the building," Luca said, placing a stack of photographs on the desk. "My men noticed a man showing up at the building across the street 3 days in a row, always carrying a camera with a telephoto lens, photographing your penthouse, specifically the girl." Dominic picked up the photos, his jaw tightening as he stared at the face of the man Luca's team had secretly captured, a man in his early 30s. Brown hair, a harsh expression with eyes full of cruelty Dominic had seen in many men of the underworld. "His name is Ryan Mitchell," Luca continued. "He is 34 years old, used to work in real estate in Manhattan but was fired for violent behavior toward coworkers. He has a history of abuse, but has never been convicted because his victims always withdrew their complaints. And according to what I found, he is Olivia's ex-boyfriend, the man she lived with for 3 years before she ran away. But boss, a broke real estate agent couldn't find this address alone. Someone powerful must have tipped him off." Dominic said nothing, but his eyes darkened like a sky before a storm. This was the man who had done monstrous things to Olivia, the man who beat her until she miscarried, the man who turned her life into hell, and now he was just outside Dominic's building, watching the woman Dominic had vowed to protect. "Does she know?" Dominic asked, his voice cold as steel. Luca hesitated, then nodded. "I think she does. 2 days ago, she received a message from an unknown number, and her behavior changed completely after that. She deleted the messages, but I recovered them." He handed Dominic the phone showing the threatening texts and the photos Ryan had sent, and as Dominic read each word, the fury inside him burned hotter, not anger at Olivia for hiding it, but rage at the man who had dared to threaten her and at himself for failing to protect her sooner. He walked out of the office toward the living room, where Olivia sat reading with tension plain on her face, and when she saw Dominic step in with Luca behind him and the photos in his hand, she knew her secret had been uncovered. "Why did you not tell me?" Dominic asked, not with the anger she had expected, but with worry and a hint of hurt. Olivia lowered her head as tears began to fall. "Because I did not want to drag you into this," she whispered. "You have helped me so much already. I cannot let you be in danger because of me. I thought I could handle it. I thought that if I did not react, he would go away. I am sorry. I am sorry I did not tell you." Dominic knelt before her, lifting her chin so she would meet his eyes. "Never apologize for trying to protect someone," he said gently, and his tenderness made her cry harder. "But you must understand that you are not alone anymore. You have me now, and I will not let anyone touch you or your child, not Ryan, not anyone in this world." He stood, turned to Luca with the commanding gaze of a crime boss giving orders. "Double the guards. Monitor Ryan Mitchell every hour of every day. He is not to come anywhere near this building, and if he attempts anything..." Dominic stopped, glancing at Olivia. "I want to know immediately." Luca nodded and left, leaving Dominic beside her. He sat down, pulled her into his arms, and Olivia cried against his chest as though she had never cried before, finally allowing herself to be weak in the arms of the man she was learning to trust. The 5th week arrived with long, tense nights, as Dominic increased security and tracked Ryan's every move. But the man seemed to vanish after realizing he was being watched. Olivia tried to stay calm, tried to believe Dominic's promise that she was safe, but the accumulated stress in her body did not disappear so easily. That night, just after the clock struck 2 in the morning, Olivia woke to a tearing pain in her lower abdomen. She lay still, hoping it was only the false contractions Dr. Chen had warned her about, but then a second wave of pain struck harder, forcing her to grip the sheets and clench her teeth to avoid screaming. Something was wrong, she knew it instantly. She was only 36 weeks, still a month away from her due date, and the pain felt nothing like what she had read. It was too strong, too violent, and when she tried to sit up, she felt warm fluid gush between her legs. Her water had broken. Panic surged through her as her trembling hands fumbled for the phone on her nightstand. She called Dominic, even though he was sleeping in the room next door, her voice ragged and broken from the pain. "Dominic, I think I am in labor," "The baby is coming." Within 30 seconds, the door burst open and Dominic rushed in, his black hair disheveled, his gray eyes full of worry, though his movements were calm and decisive. He saw the soaked sheets, saw Olivia's pale face, and he knew they had no time. He lifted her into his arms, calling Luca to ready the car and contact Dr. Chen immediately. Elena also awoke from the commotion, hurrying after them with the hospital bag she had prepared a week earlier. During the drive, Olivia lay in the back seat with her head against Dominic's shoulder as contractions came every 3 minutes, her cries of pain tearing through him. She was terrified, afraid the baby was too early, afraid her weakened body would not endure. Dominic held her hand tightly the entire way, whispering reassurances even though he was unraveling inside. He had faced death countless times, but nothing had prepared him for the helplessness of watching a woman he cared for suffer pain he could not take away. Dr. Chen awaited them at the hospital, and the medical team rushed Olivia into the delivery room while Dominic was ordered to wait outside. He stood staring at the closed doors, and for the first time in his 36 years he felt utterly useless. Time crawled like thick syrup, each minute stretching into an hour, each muffled cry from the room cutting into him like a blade. Then everything worsened when a nurse ran out calling for another doctor. Her expression so tense Dominic knew something was wrong. He blocked her path, demanding answers, and her reply stopped his heart. The baby's heartbeat was weakening. They were trying to stabilize the situation, but a C-section might be necessary. Dominic froze, memories of Grace crashing over him, Grace cold on a morgue table with her unborn child gone with her, and he could not let that happen again. He could not lose someone else because he had failed to protect them. He did not remember moving, but suddenly he was on his knees in the hospital chapel, a place he had never stepped foot in during his entire life. Dominic was not a man of faith. He had stopped believing in anything greater the day Grace died. Yet tonight he prayed. He prayed to whoever might listen, to God, to the universe, to Grace somewhere in heaven, begging them to save Olivia and the baby, begging them not to take these 2 souls from him when he had just found them, begging for a chance to make amends and to protect and love them in the way he had not been able to protect Grace. Tears streamed down his face, and he did not bother to wipe them. His scarred hands, hands that had taken lives, woven together in trembling prayer. He knelt for an hour, 2 hours, he did not know how long, until Luca's footsteps sounded behind him and his voice broke the silence. "Boss," Luca said, something strange in his tone. "Dr. Chen wants to see you." Dominic rose on numb legs, his heart pounding as he walked toward the delivery room, not knowing whether the news waiting for him was heaven or hell. Dr. Chen was waiting for Dominic at the delivery room door, and when he saw the exhausted yet fulfilled smile on her face, his knees nearly gave out in relief. "Mother and child are safe," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We had to intervene because the baby's heartbeat weakened, but the child is perfectly healthy. Olivia lost a significant amount of blood, so she is still weak, but she will recover. You may see them now." Dominic walked into the room as if sleepwalking, his feet carrying him to the bedside where Olivia lay pale from exhaustion yet glowing with a brightness in her green eyes he had never seen before, and in her arms rested a tiny white bundle. As he stepped closer, he saw the smallest face he had ever encountered, a baby with rosy skin, soft, pale blonde hair like her mother, and tiny lips puckered in peaceful sleep. "She is beautiful," Dominic whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia looked up at him, her eyes trembling with tears of happiness. "I want to name her Lily Grace," she said, her voice weak yet full of resolve. "Lily because I want her to grow pure and bright like a lily flower, and Grace in memory of your sister, so she will know she is not forgotten. So a part of her will live on in my daughter." Dominic felt his throat tighten, emotions he had suppressed for 8 years rising uncontrollably. He looked at Olivia, at this woman who had endured relentless suffering, yet still carried a heart large enough to think of others even in the most sacred moment of her life, and he knew he loved her, had loved her long before he admitted it to himself, perhaps since the night he found her in that dark alley, perhaps since the first time she smiled at him, perhaps since she placed her hand into his and allowed him into her life. "Do you want to hold her?" Olivia asked, and Dominic nodded, though he feared that his rough hands might harm such a fragile being. Olivia gently placed Lily Grace into his arms, guiding him on how to support the baby's head, and when Dominic felt the feather-light weight of the child resting in his hands, when he looked at the tiny sleeping face, he could not stop the tears that spilled down his cheeks. It was the first time he had cried since Grace's funeral, the first time he allowed himself to be vulnerable before someone else, and he felt no shame. He cried from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming knowledge that this child was proof that life could still be beautiful, even after brutal tragedy. "Hello, Lily Grace," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Welcome to this world. I promise to protect you and your mother with my life. I promise you will never endure what my Grace endured. You will be loved, sheltered, allowed to grow in happiness. I swear it." Olivia watched Dominic hold her daughter, watched this powerful and feared man weeping like a child over the newborn in his arms, and she felt her heart melt completely. She reached out to touch his arm, and when Dominic looked up at her, their eyes met in a moment that needed no words for understanding. They were a family now, unofficial and unspoken, yet they both knew it. The sacred moment broke when a soft knock sounded at the door, and Luca appeared with a tense expression Dominic recognized instantly as the harbinger of trouble. "Sorry to interrupt," Luca said, his voice low and urgent, "but I need to speak with the boss immediately. It is an emergency." Dominic looked at Olivia, at Lily Grace resting peacefully in his arms, and he did not want to leave, did not want the moment to end. Yet he knew his world never allowed peace for long, and that darkness always waited at the threshold to swallow any light he dared to hold. He returned Lily Grace to Olivia, kissed her forehead and the baby's, then stepped outside with Luca, his heart heavy with the certainty that a storm was coming. Luca led Dominic to the far end of the hospital corridor where no one could overhear, and the look on his loyal lieutenant's face prepared Dominic for the worst. "Viktor Petrov knows about her," Luca said, his voice low and tense. "He knows about Olivia, and now he knows about the baby. My men just reported that he contacted Ryan Mitchell, her ex-boyfriend, and they met last night in Brighton Beach." Dominic felt ice flood his veins. Viktor Petrov, the Russian mafia boss he had battled for years, the man who had always sought to topple him and seize Brooklyn, had finally discovered Dominic's weakness, and that weakness was Olivia, was Lily Grace, was the two souls he loved more than anything in this world. "What does he want?" Dominic asked, his voice cold as ice despite the fury rising inside him. Luca handed him a phone with an audio recording his men had captured from the meeting between Viktor and Ryan. Dominic listened, each word from Viktor's mouth a knife to his heart. "Callahan has grown weak because of that woman," Viktor said with triumphant scorn. "He let emotions rule him. He made the greatest mistake a boss can make. The woman and the baby are the key to breaking him. You want revenge. You want back what was yours. I will help you, and in return you will help me get to them." Ryan's voice followed, dripping hatred and violence. "That bitch dared to run, dared to take my child, dared to lie with another man. I will show her what consequences look like. I agree to cooperate." The recording ended and Dominic stood in silence, gripping the phone so tightly its casing creaked. He had known this day would come, had known his world would demand a price for any happiness he tried to grasp, but he had not expected it to arrive so quickly. Not on the night Lily Grace was born, not when he had just tasted the feeling of loving and belonging to someone. Luca looked at him anxiously. "What do you intend to do? We can strike first, take out Viktor and Ryan before they act." Dominic shook his head, knowing it was not as simple as Luca believed. Viktor had his own private army, his own alliances in Brighton Beach, and striking first meant an all-out war, and in war the innocent always suffer first. Olivia had just given birth. She was still weak. She could not run nor defend herself if danger came. And Lily Grace, only hours old, how could he drag her into a bloodbath? He considered his choices, and none were easy. He could keep Olivia and Lily close, fortify the penthouse, surround them with guards, but that would also make them permanent targets so long as they remained at his side. They would be valuable hostages to his enemies. Or he could leave them, cut off all ties, make the world believe Olivia and Lily meant nothing to him. If he no longer cared, they would lose their value as leverage. Viktor would lose interest, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would be safe. But that choice meant letting them go, walking away from the two beings he loved most, breaking the vow he had whispered to Lily Grace only minutes before. Dominic closed his eyes, the pain in his chest worse than any physical wound he had ever endured. He had lost Grace because he failed to act in time, and now he stood to lose Olivia and Lily for doing too much or too little. No matter what he chose, he would lose them. The only question was whether they would remain alive after he made that choice. Dominic returned to Olivia's hospital room just as dawn was breaking, and she knew instantly that something was terribly wrong simply by looking into the gray eyes that had lost the light she had seen only hours earlier. He sat beside her bed where Lily Grace slept peacefully in her tiny bassinet, and for a long moment he said nothing, only watched mother and child as though trying to carve this image into memory. "What happened?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling because she had sensed danger from the moment Luca called him outside. Dominic exhaled, took her hand, and began telling her everything. He told her about Viktor Petrov, about the meeting between Viktor and Ryan, about their plan to use her and Lily as leverage to destroy him. He told her about the choices he had wrestled with all night. And finally he told her the decision that shattered him even as he knew it was necessary. He had to leave, he said, his voice breaking despite his attempt to remain calm. As long as he stayed with her, she and Lily would remain targets. Viktor and Ryan would never stop hunting them because they knew how much she meant to him, and the only way to protect her was to make the world believe she meant nothing at all, that she was merely a stranger he had helped out of pity and then abandoned. He believed that if he removed himself from the equation, Viktor would see them as having no value as leverage and would simply move on. Olivia felt as though the air had been ripped from her lungs. She shook her head, tears spilling uncontrollably as she clung to his hand as if he would disappear that very moment. "No," she said, her voice fracturing. "You cannot do this. You promised. You promised to protect me and Lily. You promised you would not leave us." "It is because I want to protect you that I must do this," Dominic said, and she saw his eyes redden, even as he tried to stay composed. "I love you, Olivia. I love you and Lily more than anything in this world, and that is why I cannot let you die because of me. I lost Grace, and I cannot lose you too." It was the first time he had spoken those 3 words aloud, and Olivia cried harder, not because he was leaving, but because she realized she loved him as well, loved the man who had pulled her out of darkness, who had cared for her, who had read to her unborn child, who had wept when he held Lily for the first time. She loved him, and he was saying goodbye. A week later, when Olivia was finally strong enough to be discharged, Dominic brought her and Lily to a small apartment in Queens, where he had prepared everything they might need. It was not as luxurious as the penthouse, but it was warm and safe in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew her. He left her with a bank account sufficient for years of comfort, left her with Luca's number for emergencies, left her with a letter he asked her not to read until after he was gone. They stood at the apartment doorway, Lily Grace asleep in Olivia's arms, and both knew it was their last moment together. Dominic touched Olivia's cheek, wiping away the tears that streamed endlessly down her face, and whispered, "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Lily have shown me what hope is, what love is, what a family feels like, and I will never forget that." Then he kissed her, a soft, painful kiss, their first and their last. He lifted Lily, held her against his chest, breathing in the sweet newborn scent of the child he loved as his own. She stirred, her tiny fingers curling around his, and Dominic felt something inside him tear apart. "Goodbye, Lily Grace," he whispered into her ear, his voice unsteady. "Take care of your mother, grow strong, grow happy, and know there is a man out there who loves you more than you will ever remember." He placed her back into Olivia's arms, looked at Olivia one final time with eyes full of tears, then turned and walked away. He did not look back, not because he did not want to, but because he knew that if he did, he would never be able to leave. Olivia stood in the doorway holding Lily close, watching Dominic's silhouette fade down the stairwell until he vanished. And she cried as she had never cried before, cried for the man she loved, for the brief happiness she had lost, for her daughter who would grow up never knowing the man who had held her with such love on the night she was born. A week passed like an endless nightmare for Olivia as she lived in the small Queens apartment, caring for Lily Grace while trying to survive the shattering loneliness of life without Dominic. Each night she reread his letter, the handwritten words filled with love, regret, and the promise that he would always watch over her from afar even if he could not stay by her side. She thought she was safe, thought Dominic's plan had worked, and that Viktor and Ryan had lost interest in her, but she was wrong. On the 7th night, just as the clock struck 11 and Olivia was nursing Lily in the bedroom, the front door slammed open with the force of a thunderclap. Before she could react, 3 masked men stormed inside with guns, and leading them was the face she had prayed never to see again. Ryan Mitchell stood there wearing the cruel grin she had seen in countless nightmares, his eyes gleaming with hatred and madness as he saw her clutching Lily. "Thought you could hide from me, you bitch," he sneered. "That rich boyfriend of yours abandoned you, did he not? I told you, no one can save you." Olivia backed into the corner, maternal instinct driving her to shield Lily with her own body even though she knew it meant nothing against guns. The baby screamed in terror, the sound ripping through the apartment, and through Olivia's heart. She begged Ryan not to hurt the child, begged him to take her instead, but he only laughed and ordered his men to drag her away. In the chaos, as one of Ryan's men tried to yank Lily from her arms, Olivia managed to reach her phone on the nightstand. She pressed a single number, the only number she had memorized, though she had not dared call it all week, before Ryan smashed the phone beneath his heel. But the call connected long enough for Dominic to hear her scream, Lily's cry, and Ryan's savage laughter. They shoved Olivia and Lily into a van and drove them to an abandoned warehouse in Brighton Beach, Viktor Petrov's territory. Olivia was tied to a chair in a damp concrete room while Lily wailed in her trembling arms. Viktor entered soon after, a silver-haired man with icy eyes who regarded her with the satisfaction of a predator holding its prey. "Callahan will come," Viktor said to Ryan. "He will not be able to resist, and when he does, we end everything." Olivia prayed silently, prayed that Dominic would not come because she knew it was a trap, yet at the same time she prayed that he would come because she and Lily had no other hope. She did not wait long. 2 hours later, gunfire erupted outside the warehouse, first a few scattered shots, then a full-blown firefight, shouting in Russian and English, glass shattering, walls collapsing. Viktor rushed out with his men, leaving Ryan alone with a gun pointed at her head. "If he gets in here, you die first," Ryan snarled, his hand trembling though he tried to appear in control. The gunfire moved closer, and then the door burst open. Dominic stood there like an avenging angel rising from hell, his face icy, his gray eyes blazing with a fury Olivia had never seen. Blood streamed from his left shoulder, where a bullet had struck him, yet he did not slow, did not show pain. His gun aimed straight at Ryan, and Olivia knew only one of the 2 men in that room would leave alive. "Let her go," Dominic said, his voice so cold it froze the air. Ryan laughed wildly, dragging Olivia upright as a shield and pressing the gun to her temple. "Who do you think you are, Callahan?" he screamed. "This bitch is mine. The baby in her belly is mine. You have no right here." Olivia closed her eyes, bracing for the shot she was certain would come, but what she heard instead was Dominic's gun. One single shot, precise to the millimeter, piercing Ryan's right shoulder. Ryan screamed and dropped his weapon. Dominic lunged, smashing his fist into Ryan's face, knocking him to the floor, then hitting him again and again, every blow a reckoning for what Ryan had done to Olivia, for the child she had lost, for the 3 years of hell he had inflicted. Luca appeared at the doorway and pulled Dominic off before he killed Ryan with his bare hands. "Viktor escaped," Luca reported. "But his men are all down. The police will be here soon. We have to go." Dominic nodded and went to Olivia with blood-soaked hands, untying her ropes with the gentlest movements. "I am here," he whispered, pulling her and Lily into his arms despite the blood and pain in his shoulder. "I am sorry I was late. I am sorry I left. I will never leave you again. Never." Olivia cried into his chest, feeling the steady, fierce beat of his heart beneath the bloodied shirt, and she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. And Lily Grace stopped crying for the first time in hours, as though sensing that her father had arrived, that their family was whole again. After the terrifying night in Brighton Beach, Dominic made the most important decision of his life as he gathered all the people closest to him, the men who had followed him for so many years, and announced that he would leave the underworld behind, naming Luca Moretti, his most loyal brother-in-arms, as the one who would inherit the empire the Callahan family had built over 3 generations. It was not an easy decision, not something he could do in a single night, but when he looked into Olivia's green eyes and at the angelic face of Lily Grace, he knew that no empire and no power was worth risking them, and so he walked away, leaving Viktor Petrov to be arrested 2 weeks later. Thanks to the evidence Dominic's men quietly passed to the federal authorities, while Ryan Mitchell faced a 20-year prison sentence for kidnapping, assault, and the long list of crimes he could no longer evade, and justice was finally carried out not by the violence of the underworld, but by the law itself, allowing Olivia at last to sleep without fearing the haunting shadow of her past. 6 months later, their lives were entirely different. As Dominic sold the penthouse in Manhattan and bought a small house in the Connecticut suburbs with a wide yard, a white fence, and old oak trees spreading their shade across the grass, and he began a lawful business, opening a modest construction company. He ran with help from a few old friends who had left the underworld with him. The work bringing in far less money than before, yet every dollar was clean, every dollar something he could earn with pride when he looked into his daughter's eyes, even though he was not her biological father. For in his heart Lily Grace was his child, his blood, his reason for waking every morning with a smile. Olivia returned to work as a nurse at a small nearby hospital, loved by her colleagues for the gentleness and compassion she gave to every patient, working 3 days a week so she could care for Lily. And each time she stepped out of the house in her nurse's uniform, Dominic watched her with admiration, because he knew she had reclaimed a dream Ryan once stole from her, while Elena moved in with them and became the most loving caretaker Lily could ever have, filling the cozy home with laughter and the aroma of warm meals drifting from the kitchen. On a spring afternoon, when golden sunlight poured through the windows and the cherry blossoms in the garden were in full bloom, Dominic sat on the living room floor playing with Lily as he did every day. The 7-month-old girl with her soft blonde hair like her mother's and a steady, determined gaze just like his. And although he was not her father by blood, he loved her with the totality of a man whose soul had been remade. While Olivia stood in the kitchen doorway holding a glass of water and watching the two people she loved most with a heart overflowing, until something miraculous happened as Lily, seated on the soft rug, reached toward Dominic and tried to stand on her tiny, unsteady legs. Dominic held his breath, afraid to move, and Olivia covered her mouth, already crying even as she was smiling, while Lily wobbled upright, fell, then rose again with the fierce determination she had clearly inherited from her mother, and then she walked. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 small steps toward Dominic with her hands outstretched for him to hold her, and he caught her and held her tight as though afraid this moment was only a dream, tears streaming openly down his face, and Olivia rushed to them, kneeling to embrace them both as they cried and laughed together in the warm afternoon light, because the happiness was simply too vast for words. Their life was not perfect. There were still nights when Olivia woke trembling from nightmares, still moments when Dominic looked into the mirror and saw the ghost of the man he once was. But they had each other. They had Lily. They had a home filled with love and hope, and sometimes that was enough. The story of Olivia and Dominic ends here, but the lessons remain, for this is a story about the power of love, which can redeem even the most lost of souls. A story about the resilience of a woman who can rise again no matter how many times life knocks her down for the sake of those she loves. A story of redemption and proof that it is never too late to change and to become a better version of oneself. And above all, it is a reminder that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, that after the storm the sky clears, that happiness waits for those who dare to believe and dare to love. Thank you for staying with this story until the very last moment, and if it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, click like, and share the video so we can continue bringing heartfelt stories every day, and we would love to hear your thoughts. What this story made you reflect on, whether it reminded you of someone in your real life, whether you have ever witnessed or endured hardships you thought you could never overcome. So please share with us in the comments below. We read each comment and treasure every story you entrust to us. And finally, we wish all of you watching this video good health, joy, and deep peace in your hearts. And wherever you are and whatever you are going through, remember that you deserve love and happiness. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.